Hi, alrighty guys, it's Amanda. I am back for another video. This is gonna be the part 2 of my experience growing up in foster care. I'm not sure what all I'm going to have in this part, so I'm not sure how long this will be. So if it's a longer one, go ahead and grab a snack or something to drink. I also want to go ahead and thank all of my new subscribers and for all of the unconditional support I have received thus far. It is super encouraging for me to continue making these episodes and telling my story, given all the support I have received. I do want to go ahead and put in a little tidbit here. I am going to do my makeup as I talk. It's just easier for me to kind of have something distracting me while I talk about such serious topics. Also a disclaimer I'm going to put here before we get into the content of today's video. I am talking about a story that I experienced growing up in foster care, so it can be triggering to those. If that kind of content is triggering to you, I would advise not to watch this video. I will have other content up in the next couple of weeks, so if you're interested in makeup or off-roading type things, those will be parts of my videos in the near future. But I'm going to go ahead and get on into today's video. I am not going to be talking about products. If I can remember, I will list them below. I'm not a beauty guru. I'm not good at makeup. I guess I'm halfway decent, but it's not going to be focused on that. It's just easier for me to talk about this kind of thing if I'm slightly distracted and not just staring at a camera. So just to recap my previous video in part 1, in reviewing it, I noticed that I didn't really address anything about a father, so I kind of want to clarify that now. It will resurface in later parts, but I have been told a couple of different things in relation to my biological father. I was told he either didn't know about me when I was first born, or he didn't want to have anything to do with being a father to me. So there's not much information at this point in my story to really address him, but I did feel, in case anybody's watching and was curious why it's not mentioned, hasn't been mentioned, that's why. It will come up in future videos once I'm older. It will be a subject that's discussed. In this video, I kind of wanted to talk a little bit more about, while I discuss where I'm at, my emotional state and kind of things that children often deal with, and behavioral issues and disorders that they can develop. In the first part, it was primarily relatively just information based. Due to being so young at that point in my life, I can't recall how I always behaved. There were parts that I could, but getting into this section, I am able to remember a lot more of things that I personally was struggling with and that I was dealing with. And keep in mind, while I tell all of this part series, I guess you could refer to it as, that this is just my experience and what I developed and how things affected me. Not every child's going to be affected the same way. Some can be affected worse, and some can it not have that much of an effect on them. However, it is not really discussed that most children who are in any kind of care or in state custody or in foster care do suffer from mental illness and mental health in a number of ways. You have to keep in mind that the reason a child is typically in foster care is going to be due to previous abuse, abandonment, or neglect, either from a caregiver or a biological family member or their parents. So also in the last video I had discussed, where I had left off rather, is a home that I had been in for a while, and I had finally been building some attachments, which leads to one of the things I want to discuss, and is kind of being discussed now with some other things that are happening on YouTube, is attachment disorders. Whenever children and even adults are repeatedly abandoned, they often get these disorders of attachment and not being able to build healthy relationships because they get this feeling that they're never going to be wanted or they're never going to be good enough. And why attach myself to one person when I have tried in the past and it was unsuccessful? Even at a young age, you can build these kind of disorders not even knowing what's causing it. You just can't connect to people as someone with a quote unquote normal life. And I use that loosely as well. So I did have issues with attaching to people. I did gravitate more towards women just because I had not really had a male figure. In foster homes that I had, there were foster fathers. Typically they were working though. So, I really never had a big opportunity to build a relationship with an adult man to have that father-like role model, so to speak. So I always found it a little bit easier for me to attach to females, and whether that be the older foster children that were female in the home or the foster mother. So that was something that I personally struggled with, and it continued with me. That will reoccur as I go through telling my story. But moving from that home, I can't remember exactly if I was directly placed into the next home I remember the most, or if there were homes in between. So I did review my records just because this next foster home I'm going to talk about was the last foster home I ended up being a foster child in. And I did review my records just to be able to provide some context to people, especially if you're watching this not really having any knowledge of the system and how it works. When you're in the system for a long time, displacements and moving foster homes is really common. And I did review and see that I was in about 30 different foster homes. That is a lot. I was in state's care my whole life, from infancy to 10 years old. So over a 10-year span, there were approximately 30 disruptions. And those are only the ones that are documented. It's not documented always on what caused them. At times, I'm sure some of the disruptions were due to my behavior. In other instances, it could have just been that the family was either moving, or they were no longer going to foster, or their license to foster was coming due to end. So I can't clarify how many of those homes were disrupted for what reason. It's not documented clearly enough for me to be able to provide that information, but there were about 30 I was able to count that I had been placed in and then placed in another home. So that's just to give a little bit of context leading up to this next part. And this next part is the last foster home that I was in. I was at the end of 3rd grade, and it was a single woman. So there were no other children in the house. She was not married. It was just a single woman, which was probably best suited for me since I did attach more to women. And I had issues leading up to this point with other children. And I did want to briefly discuss how it was for me in school. And things have changed since the time I was in elementary school. And kids are a little bit more, I don't know what's the right term. I wouldn't say that they're educated about this, but they're not as judgmental, and I know it still exists today, but when I was in school, there wasn't any anti-bullying campaigns or any talks about not being a bully in school and educating children. So I was bullied in the sense of, if anybody, like for mommy daddy days, for example, I did not have anybody go with me because they weren't a part of my life. And at that time, it's not something that foster parents did. I don't know if that has changed in recent times. So I didn't have anybody with me on those days. And kids would ask, and I would try to explain to them, you know, that I don't live with my mom or dad. And being young, they really couldn't understand that. So it would often lead to bullying of, oh, you're an orphan, your parents don't love you, what did you do wrong? And that's hard for a young child, especially it was for me, to be being moved constantly and not feeling like I belonged anywhere, and then going to school where you spent most of your days and having kids kind of reiterate that to you. It was really hard for me at that point to make friends, to have any kind of normalcy to my life, because the one place I thought I would be able to make friends and kind of be normal, so to speak, was going to be in the school setting. And it ended up not working out for me. Children just weren't understandable, and they were young. So even had I tried to explain it in the way a young child would try to explain a situation like this, it probably wouldn't have been easy to understand anyways. So that was something that I struggled with probably until I got into high school. I struggled with not particularly bullying once I got older. I mean, it occurred here and there, but it was more, I was afraid to make friends because I was afraid they were gonna find out that I didn't have like a quote unquote family or a normal family. So leading into this also, I did want to clarify that when children are in foster care, they do have the opportunity to see their biological family and other relatives. It's usually managed by the caseworker who is working in effort for the child. They typically plan those things. My family was given these opportunities, and unfortunately, they would either not show up, or it would be either just my grandma or my middle sister, and it was a short visit. My mom, my biological mom, often did not come. And a lot of that was because she was too engulfed in the lifestyle she was living to either remember or make the time to come see me. And then, of course, I had briefly mentioned she did eventually end up going to prison. And it's not common and it doesn't happen anymore. But back in the day when I was in care, they did actually set up a visitation for me to visit my mom in prison. And it was scary. I mean, I was a young kid going into where the inmates were, not really understanding anything. So that was scary, but it was a turning point for me. Up until that point, I really had still held hope to be with my biological family. And oftentimes that is the case. You still hope when you're in care to end up back with your biological family, to have that sense of normalcy again, not have to be moved from home to home, you know, not really have to worry about having to start all over with new people, learn their behaviors, and just adjust to that. So it was always a hope of mine. However, this was a turning point for me, I believe, when I did go see her. It was very awkward. She was kind, like she was nice to me, but it was very fake to me. Even as a child, it was kind of fake that she wanted to be with me, and she wanted, as soon as she got out, I was going to be back in her care, and really providing me false hope. I know now, just from my professional work in child welfare, it's not really allowed for parents when they are having visitation with their children to have comments like that, just because it is detrimental to the child to be provided that sense of false hope, because you can't ever really know. So, and this does tie into where I will be headed. So from this point on, I kind of started to have the realization as a young child that I wasn't going to be back with my biological family. At this point, if I'm having to see my mom in jail, she's obviously not trying to change her life enough to regain custody of me. So that really kind of started to shift in me. And I was starting to understand that because of that, I would eventually have to end up being in another home and hopefully get adopted and not have to worry about the next family I'm going to be put with. Are they going to be nice to me? Are the kids going to be nice to me? Am I going to get along with them? You know, are they going to feed me? What kind of bedroom am I going to have? Just silly, some are serious, but some are silly thoughts that I was having as a child. But I was coming to the realization that I probably was not going to be reunified with my mom. So I had this mentality either going in or while I was in this last foster home. Again, I can't remember exact time frames of when I did what exactly in this part. So I went into this last foster home. I had attachment issues. I had abandonment issues. I was struggling with just about everything. If I didn't get my way, I would get upset because I was coming from the aspect, well, if they're not able to provide this to me, then they don't care about me. And some of it was just materialistic things like toys. Like, if they're not going to give me this toy that I really want, then they obviously don't care about me enough for me to be happy. I really had, for me, and I feel for most kids in care that are kind of getting older, you really rely on people showing you their affection through material objects because it's an actual possession that you can hold on to. For me, I didn't have any real concept of love. And that's hard to say, but it's true. I really didn't have a concept of what real love was or what, motherly daughter relationships were. I didn't know what that was, and I didn't know what a healthy one was, and that's for sure. I always had love, even at this point in my life, for my biological mom. I didn't know any different. As I got older and, went through these things, I did become resentful towards her. And it branched off to the other members of the family. I became resentful that, well, why didn't they do anything? Why didn't they try to see if they could, care for me in some way? Why did they let me go through all of this pain, all of this trauma? Because moving from home to home is super traumatic. I guess a good way to try and relate is if you ever move across state or multiple states or a different country, like how stressful that is. But you're an adult and you're planning that and you know where you're going to live and you know who's going to be in your house. When you're a kid and you're in care and you're being transferred from home to home, you don't know where you're going. You don't know if you're going to the next town over. You don't know if you're going just a few blocks down the street. You don't know if you're going to a new state. You don't know. You just are brought by your caseworker. Oh, here's this person. Here's so-and-so and so-and-so. You're going to be living with them for a while. And that's hard. And if you already are suffering from having these attachment disorders or any other mental illness, depression, anxiety, anything like that, and trying to have to start over so many times, it's really detrimental, and it has had effects on me as an adult. And it was really hard going into this last foster home. It was because I didn't know. You never know when you're going into your last home. You start to worry, or at least I did. Am I going to age out of the system? Am I going to have to just constantly be moving from home to home as a kid until I'm finally 18? And then what? I don't have any family. I don't have any supports. I haven't ever made any friends at this point. I, was just trying to live and survive. I was totally, as a young child, I was totally in survival mode. I would lie to get things the way I wanted them. I would lie to, if I broke something, I would try to lie about it so I wouldn't have to be rehomed, because that was a concern. Like, if you did something wrong, it was always a fear for me. Well, I broke something, or this happened. And the fear is, when are they going to pick me up? When am I going to have to meet new people? When am I going to have to try and start all over? And as anyone could imagine, it takes a toll on you. And it takes a long time, like however many years you're suffering through that, takes that, if not more, to work through those problems and to learn how to cope healthily. Fortunate for me, I guess I was just more of a, it's kind of bad to talk about yourself in this way, but I was a liar. I was a manipulator. I had learned these tools because it was the only way I thought I would be okay. I didn't have anybody really telling me or teaching me how to healthily deal with these situations. So I would do something, and the only way I would know how to get out of it is to lie about it. And of course, most of the time it didn't work out. Most of the time they ended up finding out it was me, or that I broke something and it wasn't, the kid next door. So it didn't ever really pan out in my favor. But for that brief period of time, I was like, oh, well, it's a few weeks later. She's not going to want to kick me out now. It's already done, and she's over being mad about it. And I use she just as a blanket term. It could have been the foster father or whomever, but I really wanted to focus in this video, and I know I really haven't discussed much about this last foster home, and there's a lot to kind of unpack and discuss. And I feel like if I talk about it, we'll be here for another 20 minutes. And I'm trying to learn how to cut down my videos to where they're a shorter time frame so I don't lose people's interest, because I feel like if you're wanting to be educated on this or know what this is like, you really kind of got to watch the whole thing and not just bits and parts. Because if you only watch bits and parts, you're only getting part of what the experience for me was. And I don't mean that to come off being selfish, but I am striving for educating others and just bringing awareness and kind of trying to provide a community for anyone in the child welfare sphere. I know right now I'm in the foster care part, but as I've mentioned, I did get adopted, so that will take up quite a bit. And then in my adult life, there are things that have occurred in relation to all of this. And I think it's important for people who are either just starting to get curious about this topic or are involved in the system or state care in any way to kind of hear the perspective of somebody who lived it. And as I keep saying, everybody's is different, but I've lived it. I have also worked in in child welfare for several years. So not only do I have the experience, but I also do have a lot of knowledge just firsthand from my work. So that is a lot of why I feel comfortable discussing all of this in the manner that I am. And I just really hope people are able to take away some things and maybe help build better channels for this minority group of people, whether it's the foster children, the foster parents, the adoptive parents. There are community resources, but the general public really has no knowledge about how it is for any part. And I can primarily expand on the child's perspective because that's what I did. That was my truth. That's what I lived. But it can be reassuring to everybody hearing a story and hearing an experience and how it's not always bad at the end. And there's a lot of success stories, but the reality is that it's not always successful. And that is just a part of being a part of this community and this realm, is that 100%, nothing is 100%. It's all relative and it's all subjective. But I'm going to go ahead and just quickly fill in my eyebrows as I get to my last points in this. Always, if you are in any way a part of this community, I just want to provide my support to you. If you ever have any questions or concerns, or you're not sure of something, even if you're not a part of this community and stuff I'm talking about piques your interest, feel free to send me a message or contact me. I'm trying my best to keep up with everything. And since this is my goal to kind of educate and advocate, I am going to do my best to continue that, because no question is dumb. I just want to thank everybody who has spent the time to watch this and kind of learn and become more aware, whether you were in the system or not, in any way, shape, or form. Hearing somebody else's story can bring you solace. It can also show you how other people deal with things than maybe how you handled it. And for foster parents and adoptive parents, I always want to end my videos thanking you guys and the work that you do. It is beyond empowering for those people to exist, because children like me wouldn't have been able to have the opportunities to be where I am today if it weren't for the people who are willing to open their homes when I was young, and for people who are willing to adopt, to provide children who have had such traumatic experiences and traumatic lives so far, even at a young age, to have a family and build some normalcy. In closing, I do want to briefly mention I have posted 2 videos about a popular YouTuber. I'm not going to say her name. I'm not going to drag it out. If you know who I'm referring to, you do. I just kind of want to follow up and say I do stand by everything that I had discussed in my 2 previous videos, but I did want to make it clear that I don't believe these people are necessarily evil. I don't believe that they probably went into that with the intention of how it ended. I don't agree with it, and you can watch those videos to see my perspective, being somebody who's kind of been through the system and been adopted, how I feel about it. But I did just want to clarify, like, I don't want to support anybody to provide them any kind of hate. I know that has happened in other people's comment sections. I've been grateful that everybody who's watched my videos have been pretty open, and there are opposing opinions, but not in such a grotesque way. So I did just want to bring some light to that if you made it this far. if you could go ahead, like and subscribe if you like this content, or if you want to kind of be educated about this system, about how things work. I would always appreciate any kind of interaction down below, questions or further support. I do have an Instagram and a Twitter, Amanda Pants Does Life. If you want to direct message me, you can do that on those platforms as well. But that's all I have to say for today. I hope you guys are having a good day, evening, or night, wherever you are in the world. And until next time, thanks guys.